We're back. Today we talk about strategy number 26 from the 33 strategies of war. And this is deny them targets, the strategy of the void. Deny them targets. I'll just open up by saying this is all about not letting your enemy hit you, right? You retreat right before they have an opportunity to hit you, or you get out of the way, and it frustrates the enemy. Well, one of the most frustrating things is the silent treatment. Let's say you're involved in a discussion with a partner or with somebody, and then all of a sudden they don't want to talk to you anymore. That's got to be one of the most frustrating things. So I agree with Robert Greene that when they deny you a target, when somebody gives you the silent treatment, it's brutal.
Oh, yeah. Or, if you're into guns and rifles, a moving target. They always tell you a moving target is a difficult target to hit. If you're stationary, you're going to hit them. But if you got a moving target, left, right, forward, left, right, forward, it's a more difficult target to hit.
Yeah.
You really got to concentrate.
You
got to figure out where they're going next. And so, this is the strategy of the void. Don't give them a target, and you frustrate the enemy.
I thought of, in reading this chapter, Mayweather.
Oh.
The boxer. Because he retired undefeated.
He should be the thumbprint.
We'll make him the thumbnail.
The thumbnail.
He didn't give his opponent a target.
No, he's evasive as all get go.
And he was criticized heavily for that, and is because he wouldn't go like toe to toe, right? He would find ways to get out, and be people criticize him and saying he was running the whole time, or he wouldn't. You had to be chasing him.
Well, you know what? I don't know enough about boxing to give an opinion, but this is our podcast, so I'm going to give an opinion anyway. So Mayweather made a believer out of me later on in life, my life, because I was one of those that criticized him for not standing still and fighting head on. Okay? Because when you're paying for something, you want to see a fight, right? Because that's what you're paying for, even though it's a tremendous sport, brutal, right? But it's the nature of the beast. But Mayweather had a longer vision. He was in it for the long run, and he was evading the punches. However, still punching in and getting points. So some of the Mayweather fights were won by knockouts, but others by points. So he had both. He had the strength and the speed to knock out the opponent, but he also had the brains to stay away from powerful punches. Okay? So my hat's off to him. And look, he's undefeated. He actually retired undefeated. So there's something to say about the man.
Yeah.
And anybody that follows that kind of, philosophy in terms of whatever they do. In this particular case, Robert Greene is really a connoisseur. He's super expert on Napoleon. And he brings out the story of Napoleon going into Russia and fighting the Russians.
Yeah, it's interesting because most of this book, he's talked about the successes of Napoleon. This chapter specifically about his downfall. What eventually led to Napoleon's downfall, the end of him.
Correct.
And it was Russia.
That's right.
And the way that the Russians used guerrilla warfare tactics, essentially, to not allow for Napoleon, who was a tactician, a strategist, and he wanted combat. And these Russians wouldn't give him combat.
Correct.
Minimal combat, retreat. They would retreat, the Russians, to the point that they even left the city of Moscow, their capital, completely empty. So that when he came in with his soldiers who were already their morale was very low because of chasing these Russians, chasing these further east into Russia, into the horrible climate. They go into the capital and there's no one there.
Right. Well, you just put everything in like a nutshell, but you got to read the chapter, folks, because it's absolutely brilliant. It's one of the best, I think, masterpieces of Robert Greene. Because, for example, Napoleon started with 650,000 men, out of which 450,000 were his main attack group. Okay? When he finally got back to France, there were only 25,000 that made it back. Okay? A little bit over 25. The 25 were from the 450, but of the 650, a bunch of them died, of the rest of them. So imagine this. You have an armada of 650,000 people. By the time they make it back to France, 25,000 people strong only. Everybody else died. Okay? And we're talking not just a human life here, but along with that, you're talking about horses, all kinds of stuff that he carried in order to defeat the Russians, okay? Because the countryside didn't have this, didn't have that, so he strategized for absolutely everything. And in the past, Napoleon was right on target. So he told his generals, look, I anticipate a Russian defeat within weeks. And I think that he mentioned 3 weeks. Okay? And it didn't happen. He got hit with all kinds of stuff. And the weather was a really, really powerful enemy of Napoleon. Because the weather knocked out the rain, and walking through the mud, the horses weren't fed, and then the villagers, the Russian villagers, would burn the hay instead of giving it to the French. And so they didn't have anything to feed their... So there was one point in time that 900 Frenchmen were dying per day. Just picture that. He was losing 900 Frenchmen a day. And that's not because of war. Dysentery and all kinds of other stuff that happened. So what essentially they say is that Russia was Napoleon's grave. It's absolute. I mean, I got so much out of this. I mean, it's because I like history and stuff like that. Yeah. And so, it's just tremendous.
The Russians had home court advantage. They understood their own climate and their terrain. And so the French were going into their lands. But the Russians rather, like you said, they rather burn the city than give anything to the French troops. Right. And that Napoleon, I don't think, was counting on, because Greene stated that in previous instances there was one where Napoleon came marching in with his troops and they turned the city over to him.
Right.
Do you remember where that was? I don't remember if it was Austria. I don't remember what country it was that he had invaded. It might have been Austria. And they had given him the keys, right, to the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that didn't happen when he went into Moscow or that other city called Smolensk. But yeah, it was amazing because Greene is getting into... See, when you're fighting such a huge enemy like Napoleon, with an armada of 650,000, 450,000 soldiers actively pursuing.
That was his main attack force. But he had 650 total. Wow.
What Greene is arguing is that you have to use guerrilla-like warfare, guerrilla tactics, because it's such a huge force. You can't go head-on with them. And Russia was so vast that they were not able... The French were not able to surround the Russians either, like he had done in other instances, and flank them, which is Robert Greene talks about in previous strategies here.
Right.
But they were just able to retreat. They were able to retreat and escape, to the point where the French at that point were, I guess, fearful of... They were called Cossacks, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
They were like independent guerrilla-like horsemen
Right.
and they would attack randomly, but they could never catch these people. And I remember there's a quote in this chapter where he talks about um, the Cossacks didn't lose a single man in those 14 days, in this 14-day period, but the French were brutalized. And it just goes to show you how, even though they were a smaller force, they were able to do so much damage.
Yeah, it's just the Tsar Alexander
Of Russia.
outmaneuver Napoleon. This is not the Napoleon that from the beginning, he tried to, but yeah, it was amazing because look, when they walked into Moscow, every water pump in the city was disabled and taken out. So they essentially had no water either. So they left a useless city for him that he could not just sit there and sit back and, take a breather with his soldiers and say, okay, we're going to eat well, we're going to do this. No, it was unhospitable as you could possibly imagine. And so they were absolutely brutal in terms of the strategies that they used on him. And the Tsar, Napoleon, when he walked into Russia, he made a peace treaty, or he proposed a treaty to the Tsar with tremendous benefits to the Tsar. Okay? And initially, the Russians said, okay, let me think about it. And then he realized, hey, you know what? They're wasting our time. Weeks have gone by. You know what they're doing? They're waiting for winter to come. And sure enough, winter came and destroyed. So, he lost most of his enemies, most of his soldiers to the weather.
Yeah.
The weather nailed him. There were, and then those Cossacks that seemed to be not organized and so forth, towards the end, they had actually organized into larger battle engagement companies, let's say, where they became bigger and the attacks were even stronger. So they actually get out of Dodge quick.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely amazing. And Napoleon never recovered.
We've talked about being pot committed, like in poker, where you're so far into it that you just feel, I have to take this to the end, like in poker. But then the other guy who's got the better hand than you is milking you, and he's just luring you in, and until the ending, let's say he says, I'm all in, you feel pot committed. And at that point, Napoleon, maybe, he was like, I've gone so far, I have to take this to the end. I mean, to come back with 25,000 troops, starting with 450,000 that were...
No, he had 650,000 troops. The 450,000 were his main attack people. He actually had 650,000 people. He came back with 25,000.
Yeah, that's crazy.
He was completely destroyed. He
never recovered.
He never recovered. The guerrilla warfare uses these what so-called elusive controls. They're elusive, and that's the dynamic of them. They seem to be here, and when you show up, they're over here. They're attacking you from another end, and so they attack, and then they go hide. That's what Fidel Castro did in Cuba, by the way.
Yep.
And that's how he took Batista down, which was the president of Cuba at the time. So in 1959, Castro came down from the mountains. It was called the Sierra Maestra, and he did guerrilla tactics initially because Batista had the stronger and more powerful and bigger force. So he would come down from the mountains, attack, and go back. And he created a lot of dissentment. And see, the morale of your soldiers start to drip. And that's another thing that the chapter said. He said, look, Napoleon really had lost the war even before he got started because he was mentally defeated. There was one point in there, and I need to read that part again. But yeah, the morale of the soldiers is extremely important.
Correct, because the public, people seem to side with the guerrilla force,
Right.
because they're the smaller force and maybe they're doing it for a certain cause, a better cause, or whatever the case.
Well,
Like Fidel Castro.
yeah. Napoleon was invading a foreign country, and they didn't like him.
Right.
They didn't want him in their country. So even the peasants and the farmers and everybody was burning stuff and not giving it to them. And
You know, it's
they wouldn't even sell food to them. It says in the chapter
Yeah.
that they were asking for, they wouldn't even, all the money in the world, they couldn't, So he essentially had the whole country against him. And, he didn't foresee that.
I can see, in real life being so focused on a goal in today's day that you're blind to these situations. You're so emotionally, I've been in those situations where I'm so emotionally attached to, let's say, an end goal in business or whatever the case, that I don't think rationally. That's what Greene is saying that happened to Napoleon. He was no longer thinking rationally.
He's not the Napoleon of prior years where he was at his best.
Yeah.
And by the way, Robert Greene talks about exactly what you just said in The Laws of Human Nature. It's part of human nature.
Yeah.
You're so laser focused on something that you lose a little bit of your peripheral look, your peripheral view. And that happens to all of us, Mike.
Yeah.
And
He also brought up the example of Vanderbilt and gold, and how gold was able to attack Vanderbilt, correct? Yeah. Yeah, and Vanderbilt would come out and publicly denounce some of the things that gold was saying against him, and but then it made Vanderbilt look bad. And so it's a guerrilla. It's a guerrilla attack.
Yeah.
And so you don't reply to these people. I mean, it's interesting. Sometimes
Gorilla or guerrilla? You better get your. It's not a gorilla.
guerrilla, which stands for little war.
Right.
I didn't know that the Spaniards created that.
Yeah. Interesting, right?
Yeah, the Spaniards were able to hide in, I guess, I think he was saying North Spain, and they were able to defend themselves against, was it the French?
I think so.
Yeah.
So guerrilla tactics are usually employed by the smaller army.
Yeah.
Because they can't face the enemy. It's huge. The army is big and strong, and so it would be a death wish, right? To face him head on. So you'd use these tactics in order to hit and get out, hit and get out. You may not cause tremendous amount of damage on a daily or weekly basis, but overall, you live to fight another day.
Yeah.
And so that's what's so cool about it.
Yeah, because what happened is if you're the aggressor, let's say, and you're gearing up to combat somebody, whether it's a very difficult discussion or it could be a physical fight, but you never release that energy that you've built up. That's what's happening, is the frustration is coming from that. You're ready to go to battle and the person evades you. And so now when that happens, if you're like, no, I need the conflict. I need to resolve this conflict. It's happened to me where I'm like, I need to put closure to this. But some people evade. Some people don't want to confront. They rather just stay away, evade, whatever the case. For me, it's a little bit frustrating at times.
Okay.
Because I like to put closure.
You need to work on it.
I need to work on it, yeah.
Because what you want is not necessarily what the other person wants.
You're right.
And so, you're going to be frustrated for nothing.
I know. Just in my mind, I'm like, let's close that chapter, that book, whatever the case. But you're right. Some people don't want that.
It's not. Look, it may be one of several things. One is it's not that important to them. And two, they can see they're playing you and,
Control.
pushing your buttons, and they may be getting some satisfaction out of that. and I don't know that what I'm not specifically talking about anything in specific, but
Yeah.
I try to relate a lot of these things to our daily business, and I do see a lot of it being done. Like right now, I'm a little frustrated with one of the deals that we've got going on, but there's absolutely nothing that I can do about it. I've actually sat down and said to myself, what can I do to improve this situation? And the answer is zilch. Because the control lies in the hands of another person whom we have no contact with. Okay? And so
you gotta just let
you gotta let it ride.
where they
as
fall.
Difficult as it is, because I would love to be able to resolve whatever it is that's going on over at the other end that's delaying that, and it's delaying us. So I would love to be able to come in and say, what can we do to help here?
Yeah.
But that's not an option, so we just need to sit back and wait.
Mm-hmm.
Now, fortunately, time is of the essence, so time will cure it, because we have a deadline, and it either gets done or it doesn't. Okay? And so beyond that deadline will be the end of my frustration.
Well, and in the business that we're in, real estate, money is involved. Money's on the line.
Money's on the line
So that when you're at the potential of gaining or risking losing money, things get done, because that's a pain point.
Well, my concern is for our clients.
Of course.
Our clients.
That's who we're taking care of. That's
Right.
who our
Right.
responsibility is for.
So just to make it clear, we've done everything we possibly can,
Yeah.
but there's
Other variables.
third party involved that we cannot control, and so
Yeah. It's a great chapter.
yeah,
It's it does apply, I feel, to the day-to-day situations. Know when somebody's pulling you in, luring you in, like the Russians did to Napoleon. Recognizing that. It's difficult in the moment, but are you being, maybe taking a step back and sitting back and saying, am I being blindsided? Am I
Right.
not looking at things rationally?
After they did the compilation of reasons, I forget what Robert Greene calls it right now at the end, but he said, look, Napoleon lost to the Russians because his mind failed him before his army did. And so
Mental warfare.
mental warfare. The Tsar just played him really beautifully. And the Russians are a tremendous civilization.
Sure.
You could say the same thing about the Chinese, the Persians. These people, there's been warfare throughout the history of the world, and you see some maneuvers that, in my mind, they're like magical.
Yeah.
You say to yourself, how did they ever think about doing something like that? That's the beauty of looking into history and into back. It's and history repeats itself.
Yep.
So all good.
Anything else you'd like to add to it?
No, we're good.
All right. Be a guerrilla warfare tactician.
Yeah, there.
Thank you.